was, here's why I didn't work for the other sites. So I worked for On Gamers, right? And after that, because I obviously had a falling out with certain people there, unsurprisingly, when those exact people like Slasher said, come and work at Yahoo Esports, like, one, stop messaging me, and two, no. Like, and I went and did it freelance, right? But what's funny is I did actually get, as I know Richard did, someone contacted us when ESPN Esports was launching them. They were like, hey, we'd like you to write an article. Except that isn't what the email said, because then I might have done an article. In fact, people might know I famously published one and said, I would have given this to ESPN, but they were rude. And what happened was I got an email that was mental. My email, remember, this isn't like 2016 when I'm already like a 15-year established veteran who's done all these things. I got an email that said, we'd really like you to collaborate and write an article with Slasher for ESPN Esports. Now, the obvious thing I just replied was, why would I need Slasher? It's like, I think I'll just write my own article, mate. Like, and what's bizarre is that in itself, by the way, gives you a clue as to what some of these sites were like. Essentially, as far as I can tell, they wanted me to write an article where I would, like the fucking Family Guy sketch of how Good Will Hunting was written. I would just write an article. Then I don't know what Slasher would do. I don't know, fucking put a caption on a photo, and then we just both share a byline. And it's like, is this what ESPN is going to be like? So, because in that scenario, it's like you've decided Slasher's your 1A option, your star player, and you want me to prop him up in that scenario. So it just shows what a weird mentality these sites had, because in that scenario, like, I just thought to myself, I can have my own byline though, mate. Why would I go on that angle? So I always thought as well, one of the biggest hindrances to those sites, as I alluded to, was like a really weird type of gatekeeping from the editorial staff. Like, one of the most misunderstood parts is, with all the millions they wasted, they didn't end up with loads of awesome content. It's not like they wasted it, but it's like, hey, look at what we got though. Like, we did get those great documentaries. Actually, the saddest thing is they tended to spend it in all the wrong places and on the people who didn't generate that much. Like, it wasn't like Richard got $500,000 for all these people. Like, no, like, some people got maybe a year's salary, some of the better people. Most people I know didn't work at more than one or two of these sites. They just realized the game eventually and moved on. So sadly, I actually found those sites to even be very cynical, even for my first encounter with a bunch of them.
I turned down ESPN quite famously. I mean,
wow.
Just to say that, because I'd already signed with Turner. I did the interview before they appointed Slasher.
That's fair.
And they were, and got to the kind of minutia stage where they were like going, and obviously your tweets, you're gonna have to.
Oh god,
we're gonna have to get you an intern for that. And I said, why? What's wrong with my tweets? And he went. This was a tweet from, I believe, April 2014. You should go and drink bleach. Do you think that's the kind of thing an editor of a site like ESPN should be saying? I'm like, I don't give a fuck, mate. I'll say what I like, actually, if that's all right with you. So yeah, so I actually got to the stage. I even got to the stage where I said, look, I'm not going to take the job. I don't want to work for you. Even if we ever did in the future, no one would ever control my Twitter. That would be a deal breaker. And then they were like, well, can you? What's that? Sorry.
You know that made them mad, right? Because remember, I told you guys this story a couple times. When we were talking, the freaking editors from ESPN called me and said, why are you hiring them? Why are you talking to them?
Yeah.
And I was like, because they're the best in the business. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, because, I had a couple, there was a couple, it was like ESPN, and I think I interviewed with the LA Times as well when they were going to get into esports journalism. And it's just like, I don't know, man, the way they talk to you, like, they come in like, hey, we're gonna make you, like, and it's like, I've been good for 20 years.
Exactly.
Like, I've survived when there was no money in this industry. Not just survived, I've thrived. I've turned what is essentially a hobby into a very good living. So why would I need ESPN? You know, like, why would I need?
Exactly.
Why would I need the LA Times? They never quite got that. But yeah, they would come in and, they would offer you these positions, and they think, you're going to be blown away. And I'm just like, no, it's okay, actually. Yeah, and they don't like it. They never do.
I do want to talk about the business model, because so there have been a few things, guys, about this. So one of them there's been kind of two entities. Well, actually, technically, it's been three. There's been the community sites that have come in that have had no expectations, that have built around a lot of volunteer or low paid work, which is basically what everybody did back in the day. I mean,
grassroots and top down, right?
I mean, I did this too on WC Replays. I posted news on Warcraft 3, the professional scene, when I was first starting out in esports. So I've done a lot of that. I did event coverage. Team
Liquid was, Monty. It was all just volunteers doing it from the forums, right?
Yeah. So Team Liquid, very famously. was the website with the community forums and everything like that. That's where they got their start.
People don't know that's where Theon came from, Stu, Wax, all these people came from that forum.
Wax Angel, so, basically Team Liquid was a clan, right? But an unpaid, an unpaid team, not the entity that makes $60 million a year in revenue that you see now. That was mostly a community hub pre-Reddit, where the forums were for StarCraft Brood War. And then later on for League of Legends and for Dota and for some other games before Reddit really took over. And then we have the VC-funded sites, which were the ones that were expecting a much more immediate return and were paying all these outlandish salaries. And then we have the established media outlets. And this is where ESPN comes in, where they can afford to lose money because they actually have, they have very big sports editors involved. They have a system that they have a way of monetizing, right? Potentially they have sponsors that they could extend over to esports. They have advertisers. So the real question is, why didn't ESPN work? Because I know factually the numbers from the viewership of the articles and the clicks on ESPN were pretty good. And I think what was so weird to me about ESPN was something you alluded to earlier, Thorin, which is that so they kind of got stuck in this no man's land where they had enough money to hire a staff, including names like Jacob Wolf, that were breaking a lot of roster moves, which is what ESPN is famous for. But what people don't understand is that when ESPN breaks a roster move with Roy or whatever in the NBA, that isn't how they make money, guys. How they make money is the whole fucking video news cycle after that. It's Stephen A. Smith, right? Talking about
talking heads.
Yeah, it's the talking heads, because that is the core business model of ESPN, guys, because they actually lose money doing like NFL media rights contracts. They do not make money doing that. But what that allows them to do is on Monday Night Football to advertise these talk shows. Because here's the thing, talk shows are very cheap compared to producing an NFL game. It's, a couple people, some producers in a studio.
Can we be honest? Can we be honest here and say, who did you want to hear from that was on that staff? Did they?
That's where we're getting, Kevin. That's where we're getting.
Sorry, okay, my bad. Great writers, but go ahead. Sorry, Monty.
No, you're totally right. I mean, and this is where it falls down. It's like, what was so weird was that from the outside, I was looking at that and I'm like, ESPN, you have a good business model, but you are not even following your own business model. Your business model is you have the leak journalists, and those guys are the ones who are getting the scoops and doing the journalism. But in concert with that, you have, okay, we're going to leak it now. And then you could ESPN, because ESPN Esports is on the internet. Why don't you have a show going live that immediately discusses this after the leak? You can coordinate all this. You have the information. And so, like, I would have loved to have seen Jacobs Wolf's reporting with talk show hosts, but they got caught in this no man's land where they had enough money to hire the writers, but not enough money to do the video production. But it was going to be the video production that ultimately made the money, right? And justified the expenditure of the whole thing. And what was so weird is ESPN knows this. They knew it. And yet the editors and the people in charge couldn't actually convince the esports or the sports bureaucracy at ESPN, the corporate bureaucracy, to give them the money they needed to do it. So eventually the whole thing collapsed because they tried to double up their writers into on-camera personalities. And like, I have a lot of respect for the people who worked at ESPN. I mean, Emily Rand has become a good on-camera personality, but at the time she was real rough, guys. And a lot of the people who are writers don't necessarily have the same skills to translate to entertaining talk, like sports radio content, right?
I bet you put it this way, the short answer, if you'd asked what could they have done, is unironically just hire Richard as the editor-in-chief in like 2016 or something. If you'd have done that, you'd have had a chance.
The thing I always had was they never wanted me to be the editor because they always were like, "Oh, you're a controversial figure," and it's like, well,
right.
I mean, they were owned by Disney, so
Skip Bayless isn't controversial either, I guess, right?
Yeah, right. But that's what I mean. But it was like that at every single site. It was like that at every single site. Every site I ever worked for, they wanted the content because they were going, "Oh yeah," it was kind of like that bit. If you've ever seen the movie Barton Fink, where they're going, "We need somebody to give us that Barton Fink feeling," and then when Barton Fink's he's like got writer's block, and he says, this might be the best thing I've ever written. What do you think? And he's going, this is trash. You think I can't get another 10 writers that can give me that Barton Fink feeling? And it's like, you know, it was kind of like that. Like, basically, they wanted Richard Lewis content, what they didn't, until they didn't. And what they didn't want was me to be able to go, well, if I think this will do well, I can get like 5 other writers and I can get them to produce similar content. And then we'll have 5 times what I could do, right? And they go, no, we're not interested in that. We couldn't have it all be Richard Lewis style content. That wouldn't work. So yeah, that's kind of like what I went through. The ESPN one is kind of like, I mean, that's like a watershed moment in esports coverage, I think. It's definitely one worth talking about a little bit, because ultimately it's like Monty says, it was such a spectacular failure. And I know internally,
but it didn't have to be. It just got like, I just don't understand why ESPN did it the way they did, because they just half-assed it, right? If they had, they shouldn't have done it at all, or they should have actually just spent more money, because I think it could have been sustainable.
Together, the problem, Monty, is they took their model, which at the time, remember, Skip Bayless used to be with Stephen A. Smith. Those were the 2 big names.
Oh yeah,
they took their model that was based around have Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless argue about it, and then, as Richard pointed out, refuse to hire Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
What do you want at that point in time? You know, you can't just put like some milk toast guy on, like, hey, I don't know about that movie. No one's going to watch. Like, he has to beat Stephen A. Smith in this analogy.
But this is what I mean about the failure on the editorial level. And it's interesting because a lot of the editors that have failed at these sites, they've got jobs now elsewhere. I'll talk about one specific one when we get to the Saudi segment of esports journalism. But you know, like, I know editorially, people like Jacob and all the other, and people like Fion, they were being told, like, you're doing a good job because we're getting all of these clicks because you're on the front page of Reddit all the time. And it's like, okay, that's part of it. You know, like, yeah, we've got the roster moves locked down. You know, nobody breaks roster moves before us. Hey, let's make a podcast around that. That didn't do very well. But it's like, they never like actually realized like how to kind of level up and get to a stage where you sort of essentially have to create a community around the content itself. You have to be a regular viewer or a regular engager. It can't just be these one-off stories. Because what do you do when the roster season isn't happening? You know, what do you do?
I watch Richard Lewis for Richard Lewis. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I watch Richard Lewis to watch Richard Lewis. You're a personality, right. You're entertaining, you're fun, right? ESPN's editorial staff had a bunch of introverts that were just really good at their job that weren't camera ready by any means. That's why I want to say Arda Okal, I think that's his name, the NHL guy. Yeah, he came in for a little while, but then was like, no, this ain't for me, right? And then you saw him go right back. But I mean, I know Arda, and like Arda also, part of that was that NHL was his passion, and he got a really good job doing NHL at ESPN. So I don't think it wasn't because he didn't care about esports. You're right, Kevin. They brought him in because they needed more on-camera juice.
He was the polish, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yes. And who was left? Who was out there that could literally do that job other than, I mean, the guys that are in this room right now, to be real honest? There was really nobody out there because we were such babies at the time. No history, no training. You know, esports hadn't been around for that long. Who was going to do it? I mean, skilled editorial. But that's why I think even, you know, Darren, the editor, who was probably the most charismatic person on the staff, was starting to do video when they shut it down, I think. So I just didn't know who they were going to have to do it.
I agree. Out of all the people, Darren was probably the best on camera, and he was just he was supposed to be the editor of the project.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So that's what I mean. That they just weren't ready.
Yeah,
but
it's also as well, like, right. I mean, let's also talk about the spectacular failure of using your resources. Like, put it this way, when Turner did E-League, and I know it's not journalism, but, you know, it's just an example. The very first week of the very first show, we were at CES in Vegas. We did cross-promotion with Inside the NBA.
Where that Shaq burn happened,
Yeah, which is where the Shaq burn happened. That put us over the top. By the time we got to Atlanta to tape the show for real, we were on fucking billboards in downtown next to the Adult Swim building. We were on commercials going out on TBS. You know,
we used to put airplanes, remember, on the fucking in-flight entertainment. It would have an E-League thing.
Well, because Delta and Turner, obviously both being Atlanta companies, we were on Delta in-flight. So, I mean, when you think about all the fucking cross-promotion they did to just get us out there, you're fucking ESPN. Why isn't Jacob Wolf like talking with, back when they had like Helwani, for example, or somebody like that? Why aren't you using your bigger properties to say, hey, we got this esports property, we're doing good work over there as well? And obviously, as I will add, there's also a failure of content, because if you did, let's say I did a promotion with a UFC podcast or a soccer podcast or whatever it might be, right? Well, okay, yeah, I like the cut of that Jacob Wolf's jib. I'll go check out his work. No, I don't. This guy has joined this. Is that a team in league? I don't understand it. You have to already be following the scene. What's your evergreen content? What's your evergreen content? What's your equivalent of a 30 for 30 piece in writing? Even Fion's didn't quite meet that, because Fion, again, was writing about stuff that was for the enthusiast.
You had to be a fan already, definitely.
Yeah, what's there for the fucking casual? Yes. Yep. What's a really compelling story? And it's like, this is why I don't do it now.
Some of that, because obviously, like, Mina Kimes did do the faker piece for the ESPN magazine. But before
a good joke would be, Monty, if you think how much money they must have paid to fly her to Korea and do all that, it never ever could have come close to paying for itself. That was a literal waste of money.
Not at all. But think about it this way, right? Like, this is what I mean about editorial failure, right? If our model is breaking roster moves, and that's going to generate the bulk of the traffic, that's going to keep the suits quiet, sure, let's do that. And maybe Fion's a part of that too. But who is right? Like, what percentage needs to be something that's going to capture an audience, be a really compelling story, maybe get promoted in the mainstream media? Like, wow, what an insane story! Like, every so often, you get like the fucking story about the glizzy gobbler who's broke the fucking hot dog record, and everyone talks about competitive eating for a few months. Where's the equivalent of that? Outside of rubbernecking about TI prize pool, what's the equivalent in esports? There just isn't one. And that's and that is an editorial failure. And that's where ESPN could have basically the esports division at ESPN was just like an unsightly tumor growing out the side of a failing sports network that people just pointed at and whispered about. It didn't really. It never felt like it was ESPN for real. And that's why it is the great irony in the industry that everybody wanted to be the ESPN of esports, but not really. ESPN, it's not just that ESPN couldn't be the ESPN of esports, it's that ultimately they didn't want to. They didn't try.
Yeah, they didn't try is really the thing. Like, they really half-assed it, which is disappointing, because I think had they... I agree with you, Richard, on the principle that ESPN is dying, but I do think that there was a profitable, potential medium there.
Yeah, but I mean, like, ESPN's dying for a variety of reasons, and again, I'll just knock it back. It's editorial failures. It's all any publication lives or dies by who's in the editorial room and who's making the fucking decisions and who's making the calls. The credibility crisis in journalism isn't because fucking Jeff Bezos decides he wants to run the Washington Post, right? Like, it's an issue. It's an issue when wealthy people want to control and capture media for their own machinations because media doesn't make money, so it has to be a loss leader, right? That is a problem. Sure, we can talk about that. But when you editorially decide to run certain types of stories and then you get them wrong, and you get them wrong again and again and again because you're blinkered by your own bias, when you do this, when you make a decision to change your masthead to something cringe like democracy dies in darkness, like, these are editorial decisions that kill your fucking publication. And in esports, people are like, there's a roster move that just happened an hour ago. Who's writing that up? Well, it doesn't fucking matter, mate. No one's going to read it. I could literally put the headline, player X joins team Y, and then put that fucking ipsa liquor dipwer Latin bullshit in there.
Never know you put the Latin
and it would get the exact same clicks. It was
Yes.
that like that's the reality. But editors used to be like furious with you. You'd be on a Slack group and an editor would go, "How did this happen? How did this roster move happen an hour ago and no one's written it up?" And it makes no difference, mate. Don't stress. Go back to your fucking coffee and bagel. Shut the fuck up. Some of us are trying to actually, break stories, the thing that will always have value, the thing that can't be. Like, by the way, now that AI's here, right, I've got to laugh. I see all these esports journalists going like, AI's going to take my job. Good. If it can, you don't deserve to have one. That's my opinion. Like, it's not like being an artist. Like if you're a reporter, how can an AI report? Think about it. How can it report something? How can it break a story? How can an AI
the internet, right? Because
how can an AI
that already exists, right?
Right. It simply can't do it. An AI can't juggle a source network or ascertain the veracity of information. So I'm good. Like, AI can't replace me. I'm not rewriting other people's work. An AI can fucking do that for you. And you know what? Yeah, maybe some of these publications would have survived if we had AI 10 years ago. We didn't have to pay your fucking useless ass 60 grand a year. So, I mean, listen, it's all editorial. Like, the failure is editorially. And if you want an example of, like, how much you can get out of so little, Kevin is a great example at the Sports Business Journal. Pretty much kept their entire esports division alive for, like, I mean, how long were you by yourself, Kev? Was it, like, a year, 2 years?
Yeah, a year and a half about.
Right. So he ran an entire division, which, by the way, was going out as a newsletter and to attract the Mark Cubans, people like that in the world who might have a vested interest in esports. Over my breakfast, I read the Sports Business Journal esports division from this young, spry reporter, Kevin Hitt, right? But if you want to see like what you can do with just one salary, Kevin's an example. James Fudge is an example. He runs the Esports Advocate pretty much by himself. It's like him and one other guy. And by the way, not that he'd accept it. He is hands down Journalist of the Year this year, and hands down that is Publication of the Year this year.
Agreed.
Yep.
It's not even close. By the way, no one has come close. So
Agreed.
I mean, that's what you can do with just one salary. Now, again, why did it take people like Kevin, people like James, having to essentially become their own editors to actually create the things of value, and then the actual editorial board go, oh well, you know what though, it's on a bit of a downward trend, this esports thing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a gaming division dedicated to the 2K NBA league. Like, fucking beat me up. Like, those guys, by the way, make $250,000 a year. Some of these people. Like, there isn't an editor at one of these big media companies that's on less than six figures. They can't afford to be. They live in New York. They're on 150 and probably live with a roommate at 40 years old. It's embarrassing, but they get paid so much fucking money and they contribute so little to the ecosystem, and they just regurgitate bad ideas that kill publications stone dead. That's where you want to start. You want to shake up. It ain't boots on the ground reporters. I mean, yeah, we got problems now because no one wants to be Richard Lewis. I mean, Richard Lewis doesn't want to be Richard Lewis. Let's be real. But, no one wants to be Richard Lewis. They do want to be Jake Lucky. They do want to be a guy going to events and getting free T-shirts and deleting tweets when Dr. Disrespect says, you better, it's not a big deal, Jake. Watch yourself. They want to be that. They don't want to be the iconoclastic, fighting everybody all the time just to tell the truth so you can get shit on by the people who benefit from the truth being out there. Nobody wants to do that. I don't blame you. But yeah, we need an editorial shakeup. That's the issue. That's always
Let me just say this. The people that are here today, this is what I've learned about you. You three have what 98% of the world doesn't have, which is this gene that you're willing to risk. You have more of a, you are willing to risk for what is right. And
Maybe
Tom,
stupidly.
no, you're not wrong there. But Tom Brokaw said the greatest generation, right? It's a World War II guys that just went out there because of duty. They went out there because it was their duty to go fight for their countries, right or wrong. The people here that I'm looking at, you guys are not afraid to risk, but we don't have those people anymore. They're not being either created through nurturing or allowed to explore. We have people that just are allowed to say dumb shit and not be held accountable for it. And you guys,
and I agree, Kevin. I think esports fans should thank me for my service. I absolutely do agree with that. I couldn't agree. Where's my fucking medals, guys?
Three of them behind you somewhere. You got three of them behind you, Rich. No, but and I'm being serious. You guys could say just the most outlandish shit if you felt like it, and you don't, because you have that level of integrity and you're not afraid to risk for what's right and holding those people accountable. And as soon as people start seeing that again and getting past the Jake Luckies of the world and the others, then I think esports would be a even better place, not just for, the fans needing or wanting to know what happened, but I'm talking about the industry at large, whether it's, why they're doing the leagues, the rule sets, the players, and all those things. We got to have more, not less, because it's going to run itself into the ground, in my opinion.
Well, Kevin, it's really, for all of us, like, we remember not getting the bag. And, it's hard to fight against us because we will take that fight, because we were all here before the bag existed, and we were never here for the bag in the first place. So like, it's cool when the bag comes, but that's not why, it's why people do it now. It's
exactly.
Why he's doing it. But if you spent years and years and years and years and years not getting the bag, but still pressing on, you're not just going to stop.
Yeah, that was my coaching journey. My coaching journey, I coached for probably 10 to 15 years for like $4,000 a year. But it was a full-time job, and I did it because I loved it. And now it's paying dividends, right? But I'm saying same thing. But like they're clout chasers, and there's that certain endorphin sort of rush that they see all the views and all the likes, and that gets them going. That's their motivation. It's not to tell a good story and inform their audience of what's actually happening and make the place better. They're just getting off because of all these people acknowledging them in some way. That's how I feel it's going.
I know this is nothing to do with the podcast, but I do just want to say someone just shot at Donald Trump at a rally and he got clipped.
Okay.
What?
Are you for real?
Like, not clipped as in dead, as in it winged him, apparently.
But you're not kidding?
No. Like,
holy shit.
It's like somebody just shot at him. Secret Service just threw him on the floor, and he's got blood coming out his ear, and he did somewhat ridiculously did the Black Panther salute as he got carried off.
I think people thought that was going to happen 4 years ago, but that's
wow, that's
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.